Imagine, if you will, the scene in Leeds this week. The grey Yorkshire sky is overhead, the scent of damp railway sleepers is in the air, and our Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is standing at a podium. She is there to sell us a dream, the Northern Powerhouse Rail. It is a grand £45 billion vision of sleek trains whisking us between Manchester and Liverpool while we sip artisan coffee. But then a voice cuts through the glossy PowerPoint presentation. Rob Powell from Sky News leans in, not with a technical query about track gauges, but with a sharp, jagged question that pops the government's celebratory balloon like a pin in a bouncy castle. He asks quite simply, why on earth should anyone believe you? It was the moment the high-speed rail plan hit a very low-speed reality check, and the Chancellor's response was less fast track and more leaves on the line. Quick favour, if you are loving this breakdown of the absolute circus in Westminster, hit that subscribe button. Over 92% of viewers haven't actually subscribed yet. It is free, it takes a second, and it means the world to us here at the British Report. Thanks if you did. Now, back to the show.
I'll take a question now from Rob from Sky.
Thank you, Rob, Sky News. Chancellor, I guess by their nature, these are long-term projects. But given your government keeps U-turning on short-term projects, how can anyone have any faith that you'll see through this big long-term plan?
Well, I'm not going to apologise for making long-term plans. We've already signed off a third runway at Heathrow, a second runway at Gatwick, the Oxcam corridor. We are already investing in a Transpennine route upgrade. Electrification has already happened between Stalybridge and Manchester. It's happening between Huddersfield and Leeds. So these are not hollow promises. They're things that my first budget unlocked at £120 billion of additional capital spending. Is why, as well, we're able to sign off Sizewell C and small modular reactors. We've got a plan for growth. It is the right plan. It is based on bringing investment into the UK. Yes, in this case, in terms of rail, but that rail is just the start of it. This is about attracting more investment, both domestic and global, to the north of England, with better housing, more good jobs, paying decent wages. And just on the sort of story today, which I must say I do think has been rather overwritten on digital ID. The Prime Minister said last year that to be able to work in the UK, you would need to be able to verify electronically, digitally, that you had a right to work here. That is absolutely the case. The question is whether you can use an e-passport or an e-visa or a new digital ID. To be honest, I'm pretty agnostic about that. What I don't want is people who are illegal in this country working illegally in this country and undercutting workers that are already here. That is the commitment we made, and that is a commitment we are delivering on.
The irony of a government announcing a project that won't see a passenger until the 2030s, while they are currently struggling to keep a policy consistent for more than 30 seconds, is not lost on the British public. The question that left Reeves looking like she'd accidentally swallowed a wasp was focused on the staggering frequency of Labour's U-turns. We are talking about 13 major reversals in just 18 months. That is almost one a month. If you changed your mind that often at a restaurant, the waiter would have physically removed you by now. But in politics, apparently, it is just responsive leadership. Rob Powell's point was devastatingly logical. If the government cannot stick to short-term promises made just weeks ago, how can we trust them with a 40-year infrastructure project that requires the backbone of a titan? The latest casualty in the Great Labour retreat is the mandatory digital ID scheme. You remember that one, do you not? Only a few months ago, Sir Keir Starmer was standing firm, telling the nation that digital IDs were the only way to secure our borders and crack down on illegal working. He was quite clear, you will not be able to work in the UK if you do not have digital ID. It was presented as a non-negotiable high-tech shield for our economy. Fast forward to this week, and the mandatory part has been quietly taken out the back and disposed of. Now it is optional. It is a suggestion. It is essentially a digital loyalty card that nobody asked for and nobody wants. When Reeves was confronted with this in Leeds, her defence was a masterclass in what we call dancing on the head of a pin. She claimed the story of the U-turn was overwritten. That is a lovely new political term, is it not? It is like telling your boss you didn't fail to meet the deadline. The calendar was just overly ambitious. She insisted that she isn't fixated on whether it is a specific digital ID or an e-passport or an e-visa. She said she is pretty agnostic about the whole thing. Now, agnostic is a fascinating word for a chancellor to use. Usually, you want the person in charge of the country's finances and security to have a bit of faith in their own policies. Being agnostic about your own flagship immigration plan is like a pilot saying he is pretty open-minded about whether the wings stay on the aircraft. The disconnect here is wider than the Pennines themselves. On one hand, you have the government claiming they are the builders, not the blockers, promising £45 billion for a rail network that might eventually link Hull to Liverpool, assuming the heat death of the universe doesn't happen first. On the other hand, you have a cabinet that appears to be terrified of its own shadow. The digital ID reversal happened because they were spooked by backbenchers and a public that shockingly didn't fancy a government-mandated Brit card just to earn a living. It is a classic pattern: announce something tough to win a few headlines, realise it is actually difficult to implement, and then perform a backflip so fast you get motion sickness. The Northern Powerhouse Rail announcement itself feels like a desperate attempt to change the subject. It is the political equivalent of a magician waving a bright red scarf in his left hand so you do not notice he is dropping his watch with the right. They have committed £1.1 billion in this spending review period for planning and design. In government speak, that means we are spending £1 billion on meetings, biscuits and coloured pencils before a single shovel touches the dirt. The full £45 billion is a cap, not a guarantee. It is a ceiling. But as we saw with HS2 in British infrastructure, the ceiling often becomes the floor, and then the floor falls into a bottomless pit of taxpayer money.
13 U-turns and counting. What do you say to people who are not sure that this government knows what it's doing? Thank you.
Well, first of all, in my first budget, first spending review, we unlocked £11 billion for the Transpennine route upgrade, something that the previous government promised on many occasions but never managed to deliver. Now, that is a service that many of us here use frequently, and now you can feel the difference when you leave Manchester and go to Stalybridge. It's electrified. It's not electrified between Stalybridge and Huddersfield, but we will electrify it. It then is electrified again between Huddersfield and Leeds. That's only possible because of the money that we have put in. So when people say, how can we believe that you're going to make this transport investment, I say, start to judge us on our record, because already we are delivering for the north of England with better transport infrastructure. And by breaking down Northern Powerhouse Rail into 3 phases, this is not something that will be in 20 years' time. This is something that we'll see in the early 2030s. But it's not the only investment. Whether it is mass transit in West Yorkshire, new tram stops and new metro stops in the northeast, or in Greater Manchester, we are already delivering on the commitments we've made.
The Chancellor's collapse on live television wasn't physical, but it was intellectual. When asked how the North can have faith in these promises, she talked about practicalities. But the practicality is that trust is a currency, and the Reeves-Starmer Treasury is currently experiencing hyperinflation of broken promises. They promised no tax rises for working people, then gave us a budget that made every accountant in the country weep. They promised a green investment plan of £28 billion, then slashed it. They promised mandatory IDs, then made them voluntary. At this point, if Rachel Reeves told me it was raining in Leeds, I would have to go outside and check for myself. The Sky News grilling exposed the fundamental weakness of this administration. They are obsessed with the optics, but allergic to the outcome. By watering down the digital ID plans, they have effectively admitted that their simple solution to illegal immigration wasn't simple at all. If the ID is optional, then the illegal working loophole remains as wide as a barn door. If an e-passport or an e-visa is enough, then why did we spend months being told a new digital ID was the only answer? It is a U-turn wrapped in an enigma and deep-fried in incompetence. Let us look at the Northern Powerhouse Rail through that same lens of scepticism. The government says spades in the ground for the Leeds tram system by 2028. We have heard that before. Leeds is currently the largest city in Western Europe without a mass transit system. It has been promised a tramway by almost every Prime Minister since the invention of the wheel. To announce it again while you are retreating on almost every other short-term pledge is bold, I will give them that. But there is a fine line between bold and delusional. When you are on your 13th U-turn, you aren't a driver, you are a spinning top. The reaction from the North has been a weary, we have heard this one before, love. The mayors of Manchester and Liverpool were there, nodding along, but you could see the doubt in their eyes. They know that a funding cap is just a polite way of saying this is all you're getting, and if it costs more, you're on your own. If the costs of NPR spiral, which let's be honest, they will, the government has already built in an escape hatch. They can just perform U-turn number 14 and say they are re-evaluating the practicalities again. It is a cycle of hope and disappointment that has become the hallmark of British regional policy. Meanwhile, back in Westminster, the digital ID saga continues to haunt them. Privacy campaigners are claiming victory, while the right wing of the party is pointing out that the government looks weak. The Liberal Democrats have even suggested the Prime Minister must be bulk ordering motion sickness tablets. It is a fair point if you are a business owner in the North trying to plan for the next 5 years. How can you rely on a Chancellor who is agnostic about her own regulations? Investment requires certainty, but under Reeves, the only thing that is certain is that the plan will change by next Tuesday.
Shadow Chancellor, first up, should we just get past the issues that's starting to cause you a real headache? Can you be straight with voters and tell them that you have decided not to pledge up to 28 billion a year, whether immediately or by the end of the next Parliament, into your green investment plan? You can't make that commitment anymore.
The Rob Powell question was so effective because it didn't allow Reeves to hide behind the long-term excuse. You cannot build a 40-year railway on a foundation of 30-day promises. Infrastructure is about consistency. It is about saying we are doing this and then actually doing it, even when the polls are bad or the newspapers are mean. But this government seems to treat its manifesto like a choose-your-own-adventure book, where every time they hit a difficult chapter, they just flip back to the start and try a different route. Reeves' performance in Leeds was a symptom of a wider malaise. The collapsing trust isn't just about one interview, it is about the feeling that the adults have entered the room, looked at the controls and realised they have no idea how to fly the plane. They are pretty relaxed about the IDs, pretty agnostic about the verification, and pretty vague about when the trains will actually run. It is a government of pretty, but the reality is looking quite ugly. The Northern Powerhouse Rail might eventually happen, but based on the current track record, I would not advise buying a season ticket just yet. In the end, the Leeds exposure was a rare moment of clarity. It showed us a Chancellor who is increasingly defensive, struggling to reconcile her grand rhetoric with the reality of constant retreats. The British public doesn't want agnostic leaders. They want people with a plan and the courage to see it through. If 13th U-turns are what we get in the first year and a half, imagine where we will be by the time those high-speed trains are supposed to arrive. We will probably be on U-turn number 500, and the high-speed rail will have been downgraded to a fleet of optional unicycles. Thank you for watching. Good day.